Hello everyone. Today I want to show a wonderful game played in 1967 in Leningrad between Viktor Korchnoi and Mijo Udovcic. Korchnoi is known as amongst the strongest players who has never been world champion. Nonetheless, he has a flourishing career spanning decades, and this is one of the many beautiful games he has played. Let's check it out. He starts with d4, e6, e4, and d5. We have transposed into the French defense. Knight d2, the Tarrasch variation, and knight f6. e5 and knight ft7, c3 and c5. Knight gf3, knight c6, bishop g3, and queen b6, putting some pressure in the center. And Korchnoi decides to give up the d4 pawn and he castles. Black takes and white takes. Knight takes, and queen takes. So for the moment, a pawn has been sacrificed by white. But in return, white will get a lead in development, and we'll see. Knight f3, gaining some time on the queen. Queen goes back to b6. And queen a4, first of all, pinning the knight and also preparing to transfer the queen towards the king side. Because black is most likely going to develop the dark squared bishop and then castle on the king side. And queen b4, a very interesting idea by Udovcic, just physically blocking the white queen and trying to provoke a queen trade, which would be quite good for black since black is up a pawn. Queen c2, avoiding. You don't sacrifice a pawn just to trade queens right in the opening. Here, a good continuation would be knight c5, frees up the d7 square for the light squared bishop. Bishop d2, gaining time on the queen, and you can offer another queen trade with queen a4. And after b3, the queen can go back to d7, or even c6, perhaps, either way. And slowly but surely, black can then develop the dark squared bishop and castle, and it would be quite balanced. However, after queen c2, h6 was played, perhaps worried about knight g5 later on, or worried that white may actually capture the pawn on h7, although that would open the h file towards white's own king, so maybe not. Anyway, bishop d2 first, queen b6. There's no queen a4 in this variation, and rook ac1, just cementing control over the c file. Bishop e7 and queen a4 again. And there are some tactics here that if black were to castle, then you can sacrifice the rook on c8 and then grab the knight. So queen d8, defending, and rook c2. Korchnoi wants to double up on the c file and put some pressure. Maybe a rook can land on c7. King f8, just getting out of the pin, moving the knight and then developing the bishop. That's the idea. But rook fc1. Korchnoi achieves his aim. Knight b6. Well, it attacks the queen, but the queen wants to go to g4 anyway, and that's what Korchnoi played. Bishop d7. The light squared bishop for black usually is a problem piece in the French. And bishop a5, a very nice move, just pinning the knight, which is the most active piece, you can say, for black. The rooks are disconnected and it won't be easy for black to solve that problem. So rook c8 first, maybe trying to exchange a pair of rooks, and Korchnoi obliges. He takes with the rook and bishop c8 and bishop b4 here. Of course, the idea is that if bishop into b4, then after queen into b4, king g8, there's queen a5. And there are threats to grab the a7 pawn, which would weaken the queen side. There are some tactics there. Rook into c8 followed. Also, there could be some ideas there later on. g6 and queen a7 and king g7, just defending the queen. So avoiding some tactics later on. So after bishop b4, g6 was played, creating some room for the king to move. And queen h4, a wonderful move by Korchnoi, exploiting the pin. The bishop is pinned two ways, and of course capturing the queen is impossible, and if you capture the bishop now, the queen on d8 would hang. So g5, trying to push the queen away, but knight into g5. Bishop into e7 is also possible here, and after queen into e7, queen d4 is quite good, a central square for the queen, and black is a little tied down. This would also be quite pleasant. But after knight into g5, which is played, here the best defense would be to go to king to g8. And after bishop into e7 and queen into e7, white has already gained the pawn back, and you can just go for a queen swap. After queen into h4 and knight into h4 and king g7, f4. And we see that the knight can come to d4 eventually. The rook is threatening to infiltrate on c7. The light squared bishop for black is quite bad because it's hemmed in by its own pawns. So this endgame would be quite pleasant for white and would offer some winning chances certainly, and black would really have to fight to hold a draw, but this would have been best. After knight into g5, Udovcic went for king e8, and this runs into bishop b5 check. And after blocking with bishop d7, can you spot the move? Korchnoi played knight into e6, again exploiting the pin. There is no time to grab the queen, because if bishop into h4 we won't bother grabbing the queen. Knight g7 is checkmate, a beautiful checkmate in fact. So after knight into e6, f into e6, you have to grab the knight, there isn't anything else. And queen h5, now the other diagonal is weak. King to f8 and rook c3. We see that the rook lift allows so many possibilities. The rook can come to f3 or g3, and mate is likely to follow. Rook h7, trying to add some defense along the 7th rank, but queen g6 first, not immediately jumping in with rook f3, but allowing queen g6. Now the threat of rook f3 is even stronger. We're also threatening to grab the rook. Rook g7 and queen into h6. The bishop is under stress. The rook is pinned. Bishop into b4 was played, but simply rook g3. And there is no decent defense against queen into g7. And this is where black resigned. A wonderful victory for Korchnoi. Viktor Korchnoi the Terrible. Well, thank you all for watching. I'll see you soon for the next game.